All right, so this week I'm back in the garage. My goal this week is to try and get this 14-bolt housing all finished up. My last video I kind of left off. I didn't have the rear cover yet for it, so I wasn't 100% certain that my steering ram was going to fit where I wanted it to fit. So in this video I'm going to try and get this housing wrapped up and just finish all the kind of the fab work on the housing. In future videos, the steps after that, I'm going to start working on my 4-link suspension. I've got all the material now, I've got all my heim joints, I've got all the steel and such, so I was going to start linking this thing up in my future videos. And then I will start to chip away at the other tasks that I have that I'm going to start working on. Getting a fuel cell mounted up. I need to get my front radiator where I want to put it. I want to try and get that mount made. I can start working on exhaust. There's a number of things. I also bought sheet metal so I can start putting panels on the roof and on the sides and things like that and kind of make this thing start looking more like a complete buggy. So that's my next steps moving forward. However, today, focusing on this rear 14-bolt housing. So I've got my 14-bolt housing here, and in the last video, I was waiting to get a cover in. And so I bought a cover that's not welded so that I could maybe modify it a little bit if I had to. However, where I wanted to put this ram will work just fine. What I had to do was just do a slight notching on the edge of the cover to kind of fit between the ram mounts. However, the ram perfectly fits. I've got about 1/8 of an inch clearance between the cover and the ram, so that should be just fine. And the ram's up pretty high. It's pretty well protected from rocks and such. But other than that, I'm feeling pretty good about how it's protected. So what I need to do, this cover is going to work, so I can start welding this cover up. I've also started welding some of these ram mounts up, and there's a little bit more I want to do over here. And then I also want to cut a plate to kind of fit tighter around this top of this diff and this truss, just to kind of fill in all that so I don't have any gaps, just so it kind of looks nicer and also kind of ties it more to the axle housing. I can also cut the arms from here to here, get those in place while I got this alignment bar in there. It makes it very easy for that. So I make sure that the ram has equal measurements on each side, and then I can just cut my pieces. So those are my next steps moving forward. I'm going to cut a plate to kind of fit in here better, clean that up a little bit, finish kind of welding around this. I have a little bit of trimming to do on this other side. I have a bracket that I kind of got to cut down to make it look nicer. Yeah, just going to start with those things, see where we go with this. So I'm working on kind of finishing this part up, and what I did is I just made up some little gussets. I made up these gussets to help support these inner C's because, well, let's face it, this wasn't exactly a press fit on to this axle. So I just wanted to support it a little bit more. I just cut out some plate, kind of do it the old-fashioned way with my CAD, you could say cardboard. assisted design. So I use my cardboard assisted design. I cut out little triangles and then just notch them as needed, and kind of the same thing for these little plates. I just use basic cardboard for those sorts of things. It makes it very quick and easy, kind of just doing it the old-fashioned way. I'm going to preheat this knuckle, weld this all up, and continue on, as well as the other side. I feel that this will just kind of help tie this together and help support it. I basically sleeved this, so sliding it on. It wasn't a super press fit, but it stayed straight with the alignment bar. So anyway, that's what I'm working on next. So there's one more thing I failed to mention, and basically is I drilled a hole in this tubing here so that I can do a plug weld, make a plug weld just down to that sleeve that I have inside there to help bond that sleeve to this housing. So I put a few plug welds around it, on top and bottom and stuff, just to kind of help hold that sleeve in there so it doesn't move. The sleeve is welded in place here. I'm also going to weld that around from over here once I kind of take this knuckle back apart, but I just wanted to mention that because I didn't in my last video that I have some plug welds that I got to weld up. So I drilled right down into the sleeve, and then I'll weld that and help bond it to the housing. So this is where I'm at with this rear steering arm. So I've got my ram in place. That's all pretty much permanently welded. Pretty happy with how it came out. And so my next thing to do is I got to attach the hydraulic ram to the steering arms. So what I'm going to do, first thing I did is I put these heim joints on each end. And then I set them about where I want them. This one could probably turn in just a little bit more. I tried to set those in the middle so that I have adjustment either way, equal adjustment either way. Because when you set this up, you set it up so you can spin it and make it wider or skinnier. So these threads are opposite threads. So you kind of have to be careful there. So what I did, because I have the alignment bar in there, this is holding this perfectly straight. This makes this a lot easier. So I've got my heim joint there, my heim joint here, and so I made my mark where I'm going to cut this, and then I'm going to go cut it in my chop saw. I'm going to cut it in my chop saw, then I'm going to drill holes all the way through it. And the reason I drill holes all the way through it is just to help weld deeper down onto these threads. And then I'm just going to run my TIG welder around it and weld it up. So that's my next steps. That's what I'm going to work on. So what I'm doing now is I'm cutting off the bottom of this axle housing. This is a 13 bolt cover, a 13 bolt shave cover, and basically it comes with a line right here where you cut that off and then you gain an extra 1.25 inch clearance without having to do it the old-fashioned way. The old way that I did on my last axle is I actually cut the entire bottom of this axle housing off, then welded flat plate to it. Then I had to machine my ring gear down, and it's a whole lot of work. And you get maybe another 1/2 inch clearance versus just doing it this way. In my opinion, this is the best bang for your buck, just to do it real quick. So we're just going to cut this off, and then we get that extra 1.25 inch or so of clearance. All right, so this is how this housing turned out. Overall, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I got a few more things just to kind of clean up on it, but just about finished with it. I did the shave, I got the bottom shaved off, got the knuckles all done. Everything's just kind of loosely put on here because I still got to go back, take it apart, paint it, all that kind of stuff. And I can't weld my shock mounts on until I get those shocks, whenever they come in. Who knows when that'll be. But other than that, I got my upper link mounts in place. And my next video, I'm going to start linking this rear axle up. And I'm going to go over kind of my process and just checking the 4-link calculator and things like that. So that's my next steps moving forward. But overall, I'm excited to kind of get these housings done because they are a ton of work. So I can see why it would be nice to use an aftermarket housing because it's not so much work trying to make all this stuff work. You know, it'd be so nice just to buy aftermarket knuckles and not have to do so much work on all this. But this is kind of the cost-saving measure of doing so much work yourself that you can save money, and that's kind of my whole goal with this entire project is it's a lot more labor, but it saves you in the end. And so that's kind of where I'm going with a lot of this. There's people that say, well, aftermarket housings aren't that much more, but it always adds up because the housings themselves cost $1,000. Then you have to buy the third member. Then you still have to put the outers and everything else on that you're going to use on there. So that's kind of my thought process on there. Another thing that I'm doing is I'm keeping the stock gearing in here and I'm gearing it down in the transfer case. So that saves me money as well too. If I just use these 410 gears that are in these axles, I save money by doing that as well. So I was going to go over that in the future on what my final crawl ratio and stuff will be when I put gears into these, back into these diffs. So I got to take them apart, clean them out completely, and then I'll gear them. But right now it's just the fab work on all this. So that will also be another future video. So happy to get this portion of this done. And now I'm going to, for my next video, start working on linking this thing up. One last thing, I want to thank my friend Matt Pratt. He's a local guy around here. He lives over in Ridgeway. He let me borrow his alignment bar that was huge. A huge help in getting these knuckles lined up and keeping everything straight so that when I cut these steering arms and everything stayed straight. So that was a huge help. Thanks, Matt. These work great. I appreciate it. So I'll be getting it back to you soon.